Hey David, here we are at the end of 2020, getting ready to kick off our third annual review workshop, which is our yearly goal setting extravaganza of a workshop. And we're currently walking through our own reviews to kind of go through the process first and have our own experience before we teach it to others. So how's it going for you? What are you learning from your own year-end review process?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for this year was trying to make sense of the world more than I usually have to. This was a really confusing year, a difficult year, a year that was just filled with uncertainty and a lot of surprises, both positive and negative. And that's what came out in my annual review that I felt like we've been on this crazy roller coaster since the month of March. It's been 9 months now. And it wasn't until now that I actually had the chance to stop, to pause, and to reflect on a year that will be remembered for maybe even centuries to come. And I had to write and I had to give myself the time to make sense of what was happening right now and not making sense from other people, from news, from magazines, from books, but just to sit down and try to process how crazy this year has been. And for me, that's what made this annual review session so moving, actually. How about for you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely an unusual. I've been doing this process for about a decade now, and there's definitely not been a year that was in that time that was anything like this one. Um,
Plus, you had a kid.
yeah, exactly. Kind of felt like there were two tidal waves that hit my life. One was like a slow moving swell where the tide just keeps getting higher and higher and higher and slowly overwhelms the coast. And that was COVID. Every month it felt like we had to reset our expectations.
Hmm.
Every month I would kind of, okay, now we're over the worst of it. Let me kind of get back into gear, get back into action, which is sort of my bias is to always just be in action. That's kind of my comfort zone. But then a whole new set of headlines and a whole bunch of news comes in that it's actually not the worst that's over. So that was the slow moving part. And then having a kid in October 17th, I'll never forget that date. I can see now why parents always know their kids' birthdays. Was more like a meteorite from space that just was such a clear before and after. I mean, the way I'm currently thinking about it, and I'm still going through my year-end review process, is like a complete inversion of most of the principles by which I live my life. My first 35 years have been all about me. Me, optimizing my life, my happiness, my productivity, my goals. And suddenly it's like that doesn't matter as much compared to my child. He's just the the overarching purpose to my life so abruptly. Um, even small things like how I manage my day. Like I batch process. I set aside 2 hours and do all the tasks, right? Well, if he starts crying or he needs some comfort or he needs to be burped in the middle of that, suddenly I'm having to learn to value being responsive and being adaptable and being available to others um, just as much or more than my own output.
Hmm. Yeah, you said something really interesting to me that I think speaks to exactly what you're saying and also speaks to the value of an annual review. We were talking a couple months ago, and one of the things that you said was you can no longer do everything. Time used to be infinite for you, and having a kid puts you into a place where you can no longer say yes to everything. You have to actually make choices. And in those choices, you realize, what do I value? What do I not want to do? How do I really want to spend my time when I can't just do whatever I want whenever I want? And I think that actually speaks to a lot of what an annual review is all about. What you're doing is you're just taking stock of the things that you've done in the past year, how you're spending your time, the thoughts that are going through your head, the people you're with, the places that you're going. And you're saying, what are the things that are taking hold of my consciousness? And what do I want to double down upon? And what do I actually want to remove? And in that, not only do you set the direction for the next year of your life, but you also begin to understand who you are and what you stand for.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this before we got started, but it's a process. It's not really a process of making stuff up. I find when sometimes I write down goals during this, this process that are just kind of like they're kind of fantasies, or they're random, or they sound cool, or like would be like, oh, it'd be great, it's so cool to have a bounce house in our backyard, or some like crazy cool thing that once I actually like start the year, I'm like, that has nothing to do with anything. So it's more, I would say, a process of discovery. You're actually discovering, you're discovering what is there, but that's not fully revealed,
Hmm.
making the invisible more visible, making the tacit explicit, making the subconscious conscious. And that's why it's such an individual, personal process. No one can, put you in under a scanning machine and say, okay, these are your goals. It's got to come from really deep within, through self-reflection.
Yeah. And I think that's why we say that the annual review is a meditation. One of the things that I want to think a lot about the next couple of years is to not see everything so much as like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And success and failure and sort of every single thing that I do. And one of the things that we bring to the annual review is that, like a meditation, once you're doing it, you've won. And that there's not a right way and a wrong way to do it. And what you do is you commit to that experience. You say, for one weekend, I am going to do this, and I'm going to take stock of where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going. And insofar as I do that, and I do it maybe even with a group of people, like what we think is the best way to do this, and you can talk about that after, like a meditation, just by doing it, by listening to your thoughts, like what you've been saying. And it actually reminds me of earlier this summer. I I went out on my porch in San Francisco. It was like July. And I was sitting and I was reading a book, and the book was talking about listening. And I just started to shift my attention to the world outside of me. And it's really interesting when you do that. What you realize is that sound isn't quite as binary as we think. There's sort of layers to sound, where if someone's in the same room as me, I can hear them, or somebody who's close to me, I can hear what's going on. But if you really begin to listen and you actually keep listening for a while, you actually end up hearing distant sirens. You end up hearing birds chirping that you haven't heard all summer. And those sounds have always been there, but you haven't given the level of attention needed to actually hear them. And I think that there's something similar that happens in our day-to-day lives, where we're going and we're hearing the noises of people talking to us. And so for when it comes to productivity, things that we need to do, emails that we need to reply to, the endless to-do list of life. But what doesn't happen is we don't get to hear those bird chirping sounds that have always been there, that are these quiet cries of desperation from within us that we need to hear. And the annual review gives us a space where we can actually listen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In the same way that there's layers to your life, right? Your life is not this static, two-dimensional or even three-dimensional object that you just look at, has a clear meaning and a clear, there's nothing in the universe more complex than a human life that we know of, right? It's so really infinitely fractally complex and subtle. So much so that it's like we have to go through exercises and reflections and discussions, and we're going to present a list of different kind of cool things you can do, like go on a little vision quest, like
Mhm.
even just around your neighborhood, or do a specific kind of meditation, or ask your partner certain kinds of questions. Like there's a working through of information through your body, through your heart, through your mind, through your physical environment, that is practical. It's not just sitting there, in the confines of your mind. You want to externalize it. You want to make it concrete so you can look at it, you can listen to it, you can share it with others. That's really the process we're going through, is exploring and understanding those different layers to your life.
Why do we do it as a group?
I've really come full circle on this. And I think this is maybe one reason, as a convert to this way of doing things that I'm so passionate about it, is I remember, a decade ago reading my first kind of self-improvement books, going to Barnes and Noble at the time. And because I had no money and just like, I would spend like 5 or 6 hours at Barnes and Noble, treat it like a library, just like reading the books. But and there was research at the time I read that you should keep your goals to yourself. They should be a secret. And it's kind of makes sense that the thinking is that if you tell people your goals, that you get the satisfaction of completing them right in the moment, and then you don't actually complete them.
Yeah.
And so I was so secretive. I didn't tell anyone. It was a big secret. It was so private. And I think, there is validity to that way of thinking. We're not going to force you to share anything. Maybe there's seasons of your life where you do want to keep it private just so you have it your sort of your own little playground to play in. But over the years, each year I share more. Each year I'm more public, more open, more transparent about both the process and the outcome of that process. And the reason for that is I've just found that when you are public about what you want and really just unapologetic about it, when you're public about what's challenging you, what's hard, that somehow people come out of the woodwork to your aid.
Hmm.
It's kind of a mysterious process, but I think people are generally, altruistic and generous. And when you kind of come to the table and open up vulnerably with what you're thinking and what you're doing and what you're seeking, more often than not, much more often than not, they have an idea for you. They have some feedback. Maybe even they have the same goal. They want to work with you, to the point where now when I publish my goals, I expect to receive a bunch of emails with people
Hmm.
saying, "Oh, hey, I know someone, at that company. Let me introduce you." Or, "Oh, hey, I tried this myself and it actually wasn't a good goal. Try this other thing." Like there's this kind of mind meld that happens between me and my followers and the people who are important in my life that is so valuable.
Yeah, one of the things that I think you could hear that and you could say, well, I don't have followers, David. I don't have followers, Tiago. How will this work for me? I remember in 2018, I wrote a personal update and I shared it on Facebook. And it was like the most popular thing that I've ever written in terms of people reaching out to me personally, saying, giving me support, giving me encouragement. And I think that this is which is something that really surprises people, how much others appreciate hearing these updates. How great is it to get a Christmas card from somebody else that does have any bit of thoughtfulness? Like Christmas cards with no thoughtfulness, the worst. But ones where someone has done something funny, they've really gone all out, the one that actually has soul that sort of reflects some kind of thinking, it's just beautiful. It conveys a level of personality that actually you can never even get in your friendships with people. And so I just want to remind people that you can go on Facebook, you can share it on Instagram and or LinkedIn and maybe even email it to friends, and people really enjoy receiving these things. Now, there's one thing that I also think is important here, and that's the idea of time boxing, where what we do is we say you have 2 days, you have one weekend to start and finish this, to complete the entire process. And we do that because you're reflecting on a year, an entire year of your life. And so we want to give you enough time where you can actually think about these ideas, but not so much time that it begins to stretch and expand into your life. And once the new year hits, things begin to kind of crank up again. And so what we do is basically ask for one weekend of your time where all of us come together. And then we say, start and finish it right now with the energy of a live cohort of hundreds of people who are doing the same thing who you can share ideas with.
Yeah, that's so important. There's really a window of opportunity, in January, and I'd say even the first couple of weeks of January. Like I think for most people, a big proportion of the year is set in motion in January,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's sort of like you start pushing all these boulders, and the rest of the year they're just kind of going. So you really want to take advantage of that window of opportunity and not blow it up into this gigantic weeks or months long process. You want to time box it, you want to limit it, and just do what you can do. Like just do what makes sense for you. Just do what resonates. Just do, like, as we go through the annual review process, and I'm going to share you my own complete process that I follow with all the questions and exercises. I think you're going to do the same, David. um, pick and choose the parts that pull you, that speak to you, instead of treating it like a chore. Please don't treat this like a chore. No one is requiring you to do even 1 minute of any of this stuff. So only do the parts that are enjoyable to you. And that is going to kind of launch you into the new year with a sense of positivity and agency and kind of resonance in a much better way.
Yeah, I think of it a lot like a photo album. And it's like a photo album for your mind, where, it's great when you go to someone's house and have all these photos from their lives, and you look at them and they're like, wow, that was from 1940 or 1986. And, we were in this place, and they start talking about it. Every single one has a story. And I actually think we owe a write up like this to our future selves. We might even owe it to the people who live beyond us. Earlier this year, after my grandfather passed, I picked up one of his journals from 1947 when he was living in Shanghai in the Navy. And he wrote every single day, 4 pages. Top of the first page, he wrote what time he started writing. End of the fourth page, he wrote what time he stopped writing. And he documented every single day. And I'm not I don't do that. I don't think that that's something that most people do, nor most people should do that. I think that that's a lot. But once a year, I do think that we can do this. I think that we owe it to ourselves and to the people around us to get that clarity in a way that lives on through time, just like those photo albums.
I think so. I think there's a powerful looking back, and people are often surprised that we spend the whole first stage of these year-end reviews looking back. They're like, "Oh, this is about goals, but the future, about moving forward." But there's an old saying that I actually used in a film I made recently, which is, if you don't understand where you came from, you'll
Hmm.
never get to where you're going.
Hmm.
If you are constantly blind to the past, you're sort of walking blind. You're not paying attention to what life is trying to tell you, specifically the past year of life, which is the most recent and most salient. So yeah, is there anything you want to mention before we sign off? We're really excited to do this for the third year in a row. We're welcoming back a bunch of alumni who are going to be sharing what they got from the past year or even 2 years of goal setting, to really show you what an impact it can have. But I really encourage you to join us. It's January 9th and 10th. It's the, I think, second weekend of the year. We're really going to give you everything you need to be successful, from examples and models and checklists to accountability and feedback to a series of calls that kind of lay out the process step by step. You'll have access to a private Slack channel indefinitely for the future, so you can come back and check in, tell us how your progress is going. But any last words from you, David?
That's exactly what I wanted to say. We hope you join us, and thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone, and hope to see you soon.